We wanted to start the session off by briefly giving you a little bit of an investor's perspective before we dive into the meat of the topic of no code with our brilliant panelists. So at BGV, we've built a strong track record of investing in and supporting over 150 businesses over the last 10 years. And we've seen a lot of what works and what doesn't work so much. And one of the many things that we tell our founders who join our program is to rely on the lean innovation principles, which, if you haven't heard of them, essentially focuses on increasing efficiency by capturing user feedback early on and often in order to both minimize waste in the product, but also unnecessary spending. And too often founders may think that they need a perfect, shiny product before going out to fundraise. And they might end up spending thousands on that when what they should be focusing on is getting validation on their idea. And as investors, we look for signals and evidence of traction to evaluate whether a company's value proposition has landed. And using no code can be a really handy way to do user research early on, or you can also use no code to build an early prototype to see if what you're hoping to build is a tech product that people will want to adopt. So the message is you kind of don't need to spend lots of money and time to build your own product to validate your idea. And at BGV, we're really passionate about making early stage funding more accessible. So hopefully the following discussion will help you understand how others have built their products using no code and how to go about the process. So with that, I'll hand over to our venture partner, Umi.
Hi all, thank you for joining today. I'm Umi, I'm a venture partner at Bethnal Green Ventures, and I work closely with founders as they take their idea through the kind of make, test, learn cycles towards shipping the first release of their product to customers. And today we're lucky to have an awesome panel which is kind of a mix of companies that have used no-code tools to build their tech for good products or products for others. And so today we've asked the panelists to share a short case study of how they've used no-code tools to build their tech for good products and products for others, and then kind of also introduce themselves. And then following that, we'll have the opportunity to kind of ask questions and so on and so forth. So to kind of kick off, I'd like to hand over to one of our BGV portfolio companies, which is Paul from TaskHer.
Thank you, Umi. Am I unmuted? No, I'm unmuted. Yeah, so I'm Paul, one of the co-founders of TaskHer. So yeah, we're a BGV portfolio company, and yeah, very proud to be so. Our mission is to increase the number of women in skilled manual trades. So that is, more female electricians, plumbers, and gas engineers, because in these industries they are sort of woefully underrepresented. And there's a huge economic opportunity that is missed out on by them being excluded from these careers. Now, my background is in building other startups. So my last startup was a marketplace which connected events venues with event buyers, so corporate event bookers. And that was built in full code from the ground up. And that was really my background. So when we started TaskHer, which is also a marketplace, which I'll go into a bit more shortly, that was my first sort of port of call, was to look at how we would build that with code. So I kind of contacted our development partners, and during the process of the BGV course that we did back in 2021, I think it was now, the sort of the no code tools that existed out there became more apparent to us, and we started doing our research into what was available, and it kind of quickly became obvious that not only could we build something quicker and cheaper, but we could also sort of de-risk what we were doing and build an MVP which was way beyond something that we would achieve in full code. So we'd spoken to the team that had built our last platform, and they were great and they were affordable. They're sort of based in Eastern Europe, so more affordable. We were still looking at probably 50 or 60,000. to which we just we didn't have. BGV as a generous investment is not that generous. So we had to look elsewhere, and that's how we got to no code. And the tool we landed on was Bubble, which I think my co-founder got served an Instagram advert for. And it all sort of went from there. I should say my co-founder is my wife, and she buys anything that she gets an Instagram advert for. So it's no huge surprise, but this might have been arguably the best purchase. So we started looking into Bubble and other no-code tools, and I think we were met with a sort of an option, right? Two options. You can either go, okay, well, we're going to learn how to do this ourselves. They try and make it sound very easy and straightforward. It's drag and drop, and anyone can learn to code. Or we could bring on someone to support us. And I think when we started looking into it, we realized it really wasn't in our wheelhouse to go and try and learn how to build relatively complex tech, even still using no code. So we went out to find some developers. I think this is the one issue I have with no code at the moment, and platforms like Bubble is it's a bit of a sort of wild west out there of developers. There's it's hard to know who is good and who is bad, and there are a lot that we use something called CodeMap, which was a platform you can kind of post your project and people can pitch for it. I mean, we got pitches from around the world from $5 an hour through to people who had clearly built like a personal website using Bubble, who now decided to promote themselves as a fully fledged Bubble developer. So I think that's certainly one of the things I'd flag from our experience is you've got to be really careful when choosing an agency or a freelancer to work with. But we ended up settling on a small team of 2 developers based in the Netherlands, and had a really great experience. And actually, they weren't cheap. They were I think they were 75 euros an hour. So certainly not at the cheaper end. But because 2 things: one, obviously because how quickly they can build on Bubble, but 2, we agreed a fixed price with them. The quote of 50,000 to build the platform in full code was reduced. I think we ended up building it for 11,000 in a mixture of Bubble. And just to take you through our tech stack, so we use Webflow for kind of the pretty front end pages of the website, so sort of homepage, frequently asked questions. And the reason behind that is we can easily edit it in house. We then use Bubble for our app, which I'll show you some screenshots of in a second. We use Stripe integrated for our payments, and then for our analytics we use Hotjar and Google Analytics. So if I just I'm not sure if I can share my screen. I'll try.
Yep, you should be able to share your screen, and and then we can, after you've done that, we can move on to Reckitt.
Cool. So I'll just share, just to give you an idea of what we've built. So this is our homepage. So this is what's built in Webflow, and where kind of customers start their journey. Now, TaskHer is an end-to-end marketplace, so we facilitate bookings of electricians, plumbers, and gas engineers for customers, and then we provide those electricians, plumbers, and gas engineers with confirmed jobs, well paid, from nice, supportive customers. So we've built an app that basically customers will let us know where they are. That then searches a database to ensure that we have tradeswomen. They then go into a sort of an algorithm-based Q&A to identify the specific job they need to book. And again, with your developers, I think you've got to really make sure you find someone who understands sort of development and database architecture, and can help you implement these things. Because, as I say, I think a lot of the no-code developers, or those who are purporting to be no-code developers out there, might not have these skills. That then gives the customer a quote so they can book online. So they then go through our booking process, giving additional information, adding photos, letting us know their availability. and then that gets kind of wrapped up into a booking, which they confirm, get sent off to all the tradesmen in that area for them to accept. It's a bit like Uber in that respect. Our tradesmen just see jobs coming through, which they can go, yes, I want that one. Or, no, I'm not interested in that one. So we really, as I say, it's an end-to-end marketplace. So we really do everything but the job itself for our customers and for our tradesmen. And yeah, this sort of all of this is built in Bubble, other than the homepage and those sort of pretty website pages.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, Paul. I think it's you can just see the power of no code tools and how you've kind of managed to do the whole full journey from end to end. It's pretty it's pretty mind blowing. Especially I remember when you were showing me in the early days, I was like, wow, really?
Yeah, we've achieved so much more than we ever anticipated with it.
Yes, brilliant. Um, Ali, would you be able to take us through what you guys have been doing? Ali's another one of the companies in the BGV portfolio.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Umi, for the intro, and nice to meet everyone that I haven't met before. So yeah, like Paul, one of the Bethnal Green Ventures portfolio companies. So we actually went through the accelerator this year. Reckitt is a marketplace in a way similar to TaskHer. So we're working in the recruitment industry, trying to provide job seekers and candidates the ability to search and compare, read reviews, see recent placements made of recruiters across all sorts of industries, from low wage to high wage. And we came into the accelerator having had some experience with no-code tools. I'd built a very basic MVP or prototype in Wix, which was great way to sort of, I guess, test our thesis and some of our ideas. But actually, we found that as a no-code tool for marketplaces, not particularly scalable, quite difficult to update and use. And as we came then into the BGV community, a bit like Paul was mentioning, we kind of had our eyes open to different ways of building prototype websites using different no-code tools. And I think the great thing about the last sort of 4 or 5 years is we're starting to see so many different no-code platforms spring up. So whereas I think it used to be limited number, Wix is where I ended up, but I think there's now so many different avenues you can go down, and there's so many different niches that those no-code platforms can cater to. So we settled on, having had a couple of conversations with different founders, a no-code tool called Softer, which is designed for marketplaces. Slightly different to Paul. I've never spent money on our no-code platform, the initial build, and have invested that more into the back end and into how we can generate sales and revenue from it. And so it's all been sort of myself and my co-founder building the platform. The downside of taking that approach is obviously it's a lot more time invested into those builds, which pros and cons, it's great experience and you learn a lot from it, but you also can sit there and be slightly frustrated for a couple of days as you're trying to figure something out. But I guess all part of the fun. But yeah, so we settled on Softer, and it's really worked well for us. You don't need to have a background in tech development or anything, and the way the app works is it's suitable to be able to create different types of profiles depending on the user of the site, able to integrate with the various platforms you want to use, things like Stripe, and allow that communication between 2 different sets of users. I think that's all I'll comment on at the moment, Umi, and perhaps leave it for questions later down the line.
Yes, thank you, Ali. Thank you for taking us through that. We're also joined by 2, if you like, agencies who also work on developing tech for good no-code products as well. So we can kind of get a nice variety, if you like. So you just heard from the founders, and now I'm going to hand over to Noam from Side Labs to talk about the great work that they also do for others or companies like kind of TaskHer, for example.
Cool. Thanks, Umi. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Fab. I'm just going to go straight into share my screen. I'm just going to share a few pages in a browser to show you a bit about Side, and then something that we've built using Webflow. Let me share. Yeah, so we're Side Labs. I started Side Labs a couple of years ago. The whole focus is on social impact via no code. Side stands for Social Impact Digital Explorers. Before Side, I ran an agency called Mint Digital, which was more of a traditional, we had research design developers, and we used Ruby on Rails to build most of our platforms. But with Side Labs, yeah, we kind of thought, let's build a different kind of team, use no code, mostly to help public sector and charities, and especially charities as a way to try to bring the cost of development down, and also make maintenance hopefully a little bit easier, because I think tools like Webflow, once you've got, I don't know if the others here have used the editor and the CMS, it is far more elegant than a lot of platforms when it comes to maintenance. We've built something called Dovetail, which I'll just kind of talk about. So it helps charities to find a digital partner. It's designed to help charities to kind of make a short list, to browse agencies, write a brief, all the kinds of things that essentially get them finding a partner that will fit. And I think Paul, you mentioned it, it's so important to kind of find an organization that you're going to work well with, and you get a good quote from, and you're going to fit with. And it's such an important part for charities, because, or anyone really, because we're trying to create impact with the work we do. And yeah, finding that right partner is so important. So this we built, I'll just show you. First of all, it was an Airtable. It essentially looked a bit like this, but embedded in a web page. If some of you are familiar with Airtable, it's just a super powerful way to collect data, and then by creating forms, and then creating pretty powerful kind of databases. It's now got a whole bunch of other things on there called interfaces, which allow you to interact with the data. I haven't actually played with it yet. It's relatively new, but it's pretty powerful. So we use this as the database, and that gets fed into the Webflow front end. So for example, where we have our list of agencies, I think there's about 200 in here now. Agencies add their own profile to the site via an Airtable form, and then that gets fed up into the Airtable, and then goes through something called Integromat. So Integromat's a bit like Zapier. I imagine people have used Zapier. So Integromat's a little bit more powerful, well, quite a lot more powerful than Zapier. And then we've used something called JetBoost, which is another tool we've integrated with to do the kind of search and the filtering. So for example, if I find Big Lemon, I'll probably find them. There we go. So these guys will have at some point added their profile. And yeah, things you can search by services offered, tech offered. You can do sorting, all that kind of stuff. So this is essentially a kind of a directory, really. And I'll just show you one other thing. So we've used Integromat, because it's a bit like Zapier. So this whole thing is built on this notion of scenarios. So you build something which has a sort of trigger module, a little bit like in Zapier, and then it runs through a bunch of steps once it's triggered. So here, for example, when a new agency is added into the Airtable, it runs through a process, and if it gets approved, added to Webflow, we get a Slack message. There are a few other scenarios in here too, because we have a bit of like post moderation, so we can moderate out if an agency doesn't fit criteria, and things like that. I think that's probably it. There's a few other things to say on it, but I think the questions will probably cover the questions you've got lined up. Will probably cover it, and I don't want to take up too much time.
Sorry. Thank you, Noam. And then finally over to, by no means last, Owen, if you can take us through what kind of, who you are and what Big Lemon do.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Just going to fly through a few slides and talk about our journey a little bit. So yeah, we've been around for 9 years. We're an organization that builds tech with purpose. We are traditionally design and developers. We've got our team of designers and developers in-house, and actually the no-code solution has found a really interesting place in our offering. So just talk about me. My background's actually in development. I started playing with Zapier a lot more and integrating some of our systems. I built a home API on a Raspberry Pi and kind of integrated with if this then that and a bit of Zapier. And I don't. There's a lot you can achieve with Zapier, and I think people traditionally don't think that way. They don't think about connecting up. Like Noam was just showing, there's so much power in these workflows and being able to connect things together. But half the battle is knowing what to do in the first place. So my role at the moment is head of product. I work with our designers and developers to build our tech products and our no-code products. I've got a lot of hobbies, do a lot of things on the side. I've got a wonderful family. I've got 2 kids. Let me jump into Big Lemon a bit more. So we build best digital products to leave the world in a better place, and we do that by to solve our planet's challenges through tech with purpose. We purposefully left that open-ended. That we don't want to be shoehorned into just doing design and development. There's a lot more we can do and a lot more we get involved with. We're consultants, we have equity in companies, we do a lot more outside of that scope. So it's really exciting. The core strapline, the thing that we're always aiming for, our lighthouse is tech with purpose, and it's bringing about positive change in our work. So that has really allowed us to explore that a lot. We're a registered B Corp. I'm really proud of that. We're a 4-day workweek company, and 2 years in a row we've been in the top 100 organizations to escape through Skip the City. So we've got a wonderful team of designers, product makers. Everyone's curious and want to learn more. Our developers have taken on a lot of no-code work, and just having that mindset of database schemas and how to integrate systems, I think, has helped us a lot. But fundamentally, our stack is fairly similar to what the rest of the guys have been sharing. We use Webflow a lot for websites. We used to design and build them from scratch, but we found actually the quality of product we can make in Webflow these days is fantastic. We use Card if we need to spin up simple landing pages. We use a lot of Zapier. We started using Glide apps, and I'll talk through a few examples in a second. And generally Google Sheets a lot of the time to power these systems. As you'd expect, we still have some developer tools we use within that. Stripe is fantastic, and the checkout pages that they have are really great to integrate into. And Mandrill, which is offered by MailChimp, is a transactional email system. It's normally via an API, but you can create a template, store in Mandrill, and just fire it through Zapier. So you get some really nice email templates that are integrated into the system. Okay, so these 3 sites were built with Webflow. We bake co-production into everything we do, and all of these were built through co-production, where we bring the end user into the conversation, and using Webflow allowing us to spin it up a little bit quicker and to iterate a bit easier without a lot of development time has been fantastic. The co-production collective, there's a resource library in the co-production collective, and community champions in Camden. These are all tools that we've built that if we needed design and development, and if we'd gone through that process, would have taken a lot longer to iterate and come back to. This is a mental health support app we built for a charity called My Discombobulated Brain. The idea is if you're out in public and you have mental health issues, or if you need somewhere to recuperate or just take 5, you can find somewhere in the app, and they're partnering with a lot of people to have that little safe space that you can go to. We use Glide and Google Sheets to power that. And this app is called Cowork Local. It's almost Airbnb for co-working. So you have day passes, you spend them to go co-work somewhere for the day. There's a few tools we've used here, and I feel like we've only just started scratching the surface, but we've got Stripe, which is integrated through Zapier into the Glide app and into Google Sheets. So as somebody subscribes or pays, we're using the webhooks from Stripe to trigger Zapier endpoints and then update the number of day passes that people have in the Google Sheets. Again, we use Mandrill for the email system, but there's a lot more we want to do with this. The idea of us offering the no-code solution is that we can test this, we can get this up and running, we can add little features and A/B test things very, very quickly, whereas we would have spent months and months building certain features to roll it out. And I think getting that user feedback as quick as possible is absolutely crucial. We found too many situations where people have a very set idea of what they want to achieve, and then we build that, and then they take it to market to find out that that's not actually what users want. So through co-production and using the no-code to test things, just trying to get to market a bit quicker and get that feedback. I think that's mostly it from me today. Happy to chat with anyone. Please reach out.
Thank you, Owen. That's great. And we've heard you all kind of talk about the I guess the great things that no code could do. But I'd like to ask the panel. You've highlighted all the benefits, but what would you say are the limitations, if any, that you've experienced? Start off with, let's go in the order that everyone did their presentation. Paul.
I mean, so far we haven't really found that many. I think I question maybe if we get to a sort of some more significant scale, how using Bubble might what limitations might present themselves there. There are some things with Bubble, like there's not delays, it's not necessarily slow, but it is perhaps a fraction of a second slower to load some pages than perhaps a full code website might be. But I wouldn't say it was prohibitive. But yeah, I think at scale maybe we might start to encounter some challenges.
Thank you. Ali, what are your thoughts on the kind of limitations, if any, have you faced any at the moment?
Yeah, I would kind of say twofold. Coming back to my point, I think there's a lot of different no-code products out there now, which have different strengths and benefits and weaknesses. So I think doing your research and making sure you're picking the right one for you and your business is important. For us, Wix was not that system, and we probably spent too much time trying to force a system that didn't work for us to try and make it work, and should have just pivoted away a lot quicker. Where software has that capability of interacting between two different user sets, which Wix essentially didn't. And then I'd probably kind of echo what Paul was saying in terms of the scalability piece. Maybe we're not there yet to have or see the problems, if there are going to be some, in terms of scaling. But I think when we think of a no-code tool for marketplaces, the end goal will probably to be have a code-based site. But actually, do we need to do that right now and invest the time and the financial resource into that? Probably not. I think we want to get to a point where we're confident in our offering and have that traction and backing before we move and pivot to that code-based site. So yeah, I would say scalability, but I think if you're going down this platform, the route of no-code platform route, you have to have that in your mind that eventually this is a place to get you to the point where you're in a place where you're scaling quickly and need to move on.
Oh, that's great to hear. We're kind of hearing this kind of resonating through kind of moving fast, or being able to get that feedback loop really in, and then there might be the kind of a possible limitations at scale. But maybe kind of Noam, you might be able to add something to that around when you've been working with some of the organizations you've been working with, whether if you've come across any limitations, or whether some of these tools can kind of get to that scale, because you've probably seen a lot more use cases.
I think with charities, they've not really needed to go beyond the no-code tools we've built, because there's not often a kind of transactional element. It's more of a kind of like resource sharing, signposting kind of experience. I feel like I see a lot of founders though on Twitter say, I've built my business up from nothing to 1 million or 2 million or 5 million with just no-code tools. So I don't think there are many limitations when it comes to potential sort of scale, not just in terms of numbers through a system and robustness of the system, but also in terms of being able to make a profit, and sort of scale it in that way. So I don't know. I mean, I think there are obvious limitations on I haven't seen anyone build a complex trading system yet in no-code tools, but there's not that many people that are trying to do that. So I feel like for a lot of the things that entrepreneurs want to test and even kind of take to a stage of taking to market, I think no-code tools can kind of get you there. I mean, to be honest, I think sometimes it can be like, I don't know if this is a limitation, it's more of a frustration, but sometimes there can be a fragility when you connect up these different tools and use things like Zapier or Make or Integromat. Just a small thing, for example, that happened to us a few weeks ago. Airtable started handling the way that it stores images a little bit differently. So now it's handling them in a way that essentially means that the link it presents to you to find an image that we were then putting up onto Dovetail, it added a safety layer to encrypt those images. So we weren't able to then display those images on Dovetail. So we've had to do something until I find a fix. We've had to do something manual. I mean, I suppose in some ways code has fragility too, in that you can break things once you start to get in there and change things around. So I suppose sometimes yeah, I don't know if it's a limitation, but more of an awareness thing of like, there can be, you know, you still do sometimes need technical people to do some kind of low code elements to kind of maintain things. Yeah, so yeah, that's probably all I have to say.
Thanks. Owen, love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, to echo Ali and Noam, really, I think scalability in Glide seems to be an issue more than anything when we build apps in Glide. When you get to a certain number of spreadsheet rows, just updating the spreadsheets and then that reflecting into Glide sometimes takes a little bit of time. And we've had to build little hacky solutions where there's a refresh button that just kind of updates a number in Sheets essentially, but it's doing a refresh at the same time. So yeah, a lot of frustrations like that, and actually the fragility on Zapier with Google Sheets. The reference the Zapier knows on a Google Sheet is just the column number. It's nothing to do with what the title is. So if somebody moves a column around, Zapier doesn't know about it. So we've then got to go in and hook it up again. So yeah, there's a few little bits like that, but yeah, I mean, anything's possible. And if this is your primary business and this is what you're focused on, you're going to pick these things up pretty quick. And it's just a thing about being hot on it and accepting the world that you're entering into.
Thank you. I also should mention that we'll also be taking questions from the chat. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panel, just drop them in the chat, and we can we'll kind of bring them through. But whilst you all kind of put your questions in the chat, I have another question for the for Owen and Noam, who kind of build these products for other startups or other companies. Is that how do you go about selecting if a no-code tool is right for your client products? And for those clients who are already using no-code, kind of touching on this scalability challenge, if you like, is that how do you know when it's time to just stick with it or just move on? So let me break that down. It's like, how do you go about choosing the right, if you like, stack, no-code stack, and then how do you know when it's time to kind of move on to something else or go on to kind of code? Owen, I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, I guess it's the same as when we're learning a new code framework is as quickly as possible figure out what you don't know. So play with it, try something. I've done very little bit with Bubble and Thunkable, something very, very quick and just to understand, okay, how does this generally work? How do we do something very specific and try and figure that out. Little things then when it comes to deploying, can you hook up custom domains, like these kind of things that you might not think about at the start of it, but you kind of need to get very quickly. So I think if you can have something clear in mind that you want to achieve, and perhaps it's just one page or one bit of functionality, and hammer it and use it to get to that point. And I think the quicker you can understand the bits you don't know, the better.
Thank you. And
yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I suppose in some ways you do have to play, be curious, have that growth open mindset and kind of get in there and play with things. I think there's probably a lot to do with like, well, how complex is the thing that we're trying to build? Maybe what's the comfort level of anyone else kind of, whether it's the partner or client or the founder getting in on, getting to grips with something, how comfortable are they with, because something like Softer and Glide, quite straightforward. You don't really have to necessarily know and understand things like the concepts around HTML and CSS and constructing pages, whereas Webflow you might do. And then obviously Zapier and Make are different levels of complexity as well. It's kind of a tricky one. I think there are lots out there now that there are some sites out there that are trying to help you so look at the pattern. So like, what are you trying to make? Is it a directory? Is it a marketplace? Is it this? And then trying to say, okay, these are the kinds of tools you might want to use. I've seen one or two things like that, so I'll share them. I think there's going to be a resource list shared. So I think haven't seen anything though with kind of like difficulty level and stuff like that. But there is so much out there that you will have organizations like Big Lemon and Side who kind of have their little stack that they like to go to, because you do need to get better at it. Just like any programming language, you need to kind of understand it better so you can, speed up your processes. But yeah, I think there are some really good kind of resources out there and also just asking people, just finding people that can, and just, asking them for, some time to talk through some of their experiences.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll come back to that around kind of the resources. Just we'll kind of speak about that kind of towards the end of the session. But for the founders, what is it? What is something that you wished you knew before you started on the no code journey? Is there kind of like kind of mistakes you might have had along the way, or there's kind of enlightening bits which are like, oh gosh, I didn't know we could do this or whatnot. What are the things that you wished you knew before you selected this? I know Ali kind of touched upon it a little bit around kind of the Wix thing, but maybe you can kind of elaborate on that, Ali, and then we'll go to Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Tim, I saw your question in the chat. I think maybe this will kind of cover that as well. I think from my perspective, having had the not so great experience using Wix, I was then, and Dharma can attest to this, I was moaning to her quite a lot in my conversations with her about how was I going to do this, having no coding background at all. And I think one of the things I would have done and should have done earlier, which is kind of alluding to Noam's point, is speaking to other people, whether that is other founders, sort of specialists in that area, but just having conversations with people who can point you in the right direction. Believe it or not, I wasn't the first person that didn't know where to start with how to build this first MVP. People go through this all the time. So I would say have those conversations and then give it a go. I think each founder will be in a different situation, whether time is more important or money is more important, depending on what that is. You can build it yourself or outsource that. It kind of comes back to making sure you're using the right system. But for me, for example, the software platform worked amazingly well. It was a perfect fit for what we were trying to do. We could have a MVP up and running within a day and a half of my time. Then we had to tweak it and make it better. And that's something that we learned as we went, and people used it, and we changed things, and you develop it as anything. But from a very basic level, it wasn't actually that much time input. And then obviously you grow it as you go. Tim, maybe that answered your question. I'm not sure. Hopefully it answered yours.
Yes, it sure did. Paul, any thoughts?
Yeah, we sort of did the opposite to Ali, and we kind of outsourced the problems to someone else fairly early on. So we there's nothing. I suppose one thing was, we really struggled for a while to find people that we felt that we could trust to build it. And I think this sort of touches on Tim's point in the chat, which is, I think Owen's replied to as well. And it's, I guess, finding people who have got a reasonable background in development, be it in coding or product management, because no code, if you're building something kind of slightly complex, it's still complex. So you want people who understand things, and the chances are, if you're bringing multiple tools together, you want, for us to integrate Stripe Connect, which is the sort of Stripe marketplace product, with Bubble, required custom code, and we could have easily, I think, gone with someone who just didn't have that experience. So I think, in looking for someone, just to make sure they really do understand development.
Well,
and so I'll just jump in back in there and kind of echo what Paul's saying. I think I said speaking to people is important. Obviously, speaking to the right people is important, and whether that's co-founders or founders who have gone through this in the past, or product people, they know what they're looking for and have gone through this, and maybe even used other systems, so can sort of understand what you're trying to build and then give you the advice based on that.
Cool. Thank you. Are there any questions in the chat that I can't see any come through? I think, Tim, I think your questions hopefully been answered. I've got a few more, but if there's any more that you want to come from the chat, here we go. Has anyone used Zoho OneSuite of apps?
And Rebecca has a question.
And Rebecca.
So feel free to, ask away.
Do you want to answer the Zoho one first? Because I don't know the answer.
I think there was a no from the panel.
I've
Okay,
used Zoho CRM, but very briefly. Yeah, kind of similar to Monday.com's using as a CRM where you insert data into, but not extensively.
Over to you.
Cool. So yeah, firstly, thank you so much. This has been super helpful and really interesting. So thank you for sharing all of your kind of experience and knowledge. So I'm a solo founder. I've been doing my business for about 6 months, and it's a social impact education platform for women. And I guess my question is kind of, as a party of one who's bootstrapping and who hasn't really ever done any kind of coding, but is very much using like Squarespace and like very much kind of keeping it as simple as possible. I don't know if you could even answer this question, but like, where would you recommend to start in terms of thinking about potential options for using no-code platforms, or also being realistic about, as a person that doesn't have a team? Like, I don't know, it's sort of sometimes hard because I'm listening to all of you guys and it sounds amazing, and I'm taking notes and thinking, okay, maybe I'll start trying and exploring these things, but there's only so many hours in a day. And so just like in a very frank way, I don't know, where would you recommend to start first, or what did you find in your experience was the easiest place to start? I don't know, just, yeah, any thoughts around that? If that makes sense.
Maybe that's something we can point at the founders first, and then we can see if there's kind of recommendations from Side Labs and Big Lemon. But Paul.
Yeah, it was obviously really difficult when you're sort of super early stage. My sort of only advice would be to, if you can try and find some capital out there, be it, a small grant or something, you'd be really surprised in what you can achieve with no code on quite a minimal budget. So there are lots of, sort of small grants and funding available out there. I'm sure BDV have got loads of resources that they can, on their website and whatnot. But yeah, I think, even if you could find a couple of £1,000, you'll be able to find a no-code freelancer or a small agency that can really help.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I again will echo what Paul said. I think I probably need to understand exactly what you're trying to do a little bit more before giving an answer. It sounds quite different to what I'm doing, for example. So yeah, maybe it's hard. I think it's hard for us to point you in the right direction. Happy to connect after this and learn a little bit more about what you're trying to do. And once we've done that, can maybe point you in the right direction. But we can appreciate sort of the hours in the day being an issue. I think that is for everyone on this call. But I would suggest just spending maybe an hour, 2 hours researching and just trying to see what's out there.
Cool. Thank you, Ali. Before we
Thank
go
you.
to Noam and Owen, Dharma, you had you got your hand up.
Yeah, just from sort of an investor perspective as well, I feel like especially when it comes to sole founders and where you're bootstrapping at the point as well, and if potentially VC money or investor money, equity investment is going to be the sort of route that you're aiming for as well. The sort of questions that you will mostly get back around is, how do you use no-code tools, for example, to validate someone's willingness to pay? And that can be just purely for research purposes on building a demand, sort of showing that there's strong demand for the product that you want to build. Or whether you can use no-code tools as well to sort of start, particularly if you are D2C as a direct-to-consumer, on how you can use no-code tools to actually build a community around your product already. Because the one sort of metric that people will come back to is around sort of traction and insights, and actually how do you prove that people want to use your product and that this will be largely adopted as well. And there's a question on like, what sort of feasibility screening can you do in order to determine what sort of tool you might need. So in the case of Ali, for example, he was very clear it's a marketplace, so software was actually a really useful tool to sort of determine that enables you to do that quite effectively as well. Whereas other founders in our portfolio have also looked at content-specific platforms like Storyblog that really enable you to build sort of a web version of an app rather than a native app. which is much cheaper in the beginning, to sort of just build a content platform, for example, which is quite intuitive as well. So we'll dig out some resources and hopefully send them in the next newsletter as well, and to everyone who attended, around sort of how you can think about the different feasibilities as well.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We're back on track. We've got a minute left, and we're probably going to wrap up here. But just watch out for from the newsletter. We'll be kind of wrapping all this up. There'll be kind of resources. There's a recording for this, and thank you all for joining. And a big thanks to the panelists, and and sharing your experience with the rest of the community. I think I've taken away a lot myself, and I hope you all have too.